Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Let's begin with the latest COVID numbers. Malaysia reported 40 new COVID cases today in the past 24 hours, continuing the trend of recoveries exceeding infections. About 95 people were discharged from hospitals today, so some good news to kick off the show. Now, the first phase of efforts to allow more than 1,100 students in public and private universities to return to their hometowns will also begin tonight. The exercise will involve students from 9 universities travelling in about 50 buses to 17 destinations nationwide. Now, it feels like a mammoth effort, Sharad, now, but it looks, at least on the surface, to be one that has been well planned so far.
Yeah, it's a question of logistics. It's also a question of the standards of safety that, we can now see demonstrated, right? So the question is, those students who have been in some sort of quarantine, I understand some universities, students were encouraged not to meet with each other and socialize too much. And so, now returning to those green zones where their homes are located.
Well, the kind of SOP that's gone behind this, they're looking at buses and all luggage to be sanitized even before departure. They've already sorted out the food and saying that there's not going to be any breaks in between, just toilet breaks, so they're not going to be stopping for food. I think that's been, in a sense, they've coordinated this well. We'll have to see tomorrow what happens, but I'm wondering if this is kind of the first part of letting people travel interstate, whether we can maintain this kind of tight control, this tight grip on interstate travel as we look to open up from ease restrictions of the MCO.
Well, clearly, this is one expression of the easing up to some extent. There are, of course, other related issues which have to do with the fact that many students will continue with their education. How will they do so from their hometowns? Right. I understand that some students, just from an anecdotal point of view, some students are staying put in those campuses because they feel the facilities there are better. Some of them even feel perhaps safer in their universities than they would be in their hometowns or in their homes. So a range of responses, but to some extent, if people are being given a choice, and I think this is something that rarely gets discussed, to what extent Malaysians are being asked if they, and to make active choices about their own sense of where they should be and their own risk assessments. You
mean to be asked to put the question to everyday Malaysians whether they think they should be travelling, in case they are asymptomatic carriers, for instance?
Yeah, so, the question is, I think, Melissa, at the end of the day, to what extent are we encouraging a real public debate around these issues, that everybody's kind of leveled up and people are making informed choices, as opposed to saying that we, sort of give everything up to the experts to make decisions. And I know, of course, there are a lot of cynics out there who don't put much trust in the public to make the right or rational decision, and perhaps they're right too. There are many instances where people have not acted particularly rationally or in the interest of the larger public. But again,
you're very generous in your assessment, Sharad. I have to say, very generous.
We want to be a democracy or not. If you live in a democracy, then your standards in terms of eliciting the active consent of individuals who form that society, very important.
Okay.
Is that a question that or a point at which we're going to arrive at in this MCO?
Well, that's, I think, something that's going to be open to debate, and also we would love to hear, the thoughts around this question. But first, let's turn our attention to what's happening internationally. I think it's quite interesting to look at New Zealand. Now, the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has said that New Zealand has stopped community transmission of COVID-19 and that the virus was currently eliminated from the country. New cases have been in the single figures for the last several days now. Yesterday, New Zealand recorded only 1 case of COVID. And this all comes as New Zealand is, of course, about to relax some of its social restrictions. They're going to move from level 4 lockdown to level 3. That means that most businesses will be able to reopen. including some non-essential businesses, healthcare, education activities are looking to resume as well.
You know, that's fascinating because New Zealand has been, in some sense, quite exemplary, both from the conduct of its government to the conduct of people, at least what we read in the newspapers. I remember those cases of, politicians who had broken the lockdown rules, who offered to resign and such. And because of Malaysia, we now have some development on that story too, with
yes.
The Deputy Health Minister and I believe one member of the executive,
yes. So,
EXCO from Perak, potentially being charged for violations of the MCO.
Deputy Health Minister Dr. Nur Azmi Ghazali and Perak State EXCO Razman Zakaria expected to be charged with breaching the MCO. Again, looking at New Zealand, they've been praised for, again, Jacinda Ardern doing, making speeches from her living room sofa in, faded sweatshirt. So really kind of complying with the MCO. We're seeing that even the leaders of the highest levels in Australia, in New Zealand, complying with this very strict lockdown. But also in terms of its, they're being praised for the clarity on messaging. Now, I like this idea of the tiered opening up, right? So they've got different stages of their lockdown. And I wonder whether Malaysia could also communicate something similar, perhaps not an entire lifting of the MCO, but rather at what stages are we considering opening up the restrictions?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, you're right about the clarity of the messaging. And coming back to the case of those two individuals, remember, they tried to get away with it by apologizing. I mean, I'm not entirely sure how many people on the street at these roadblocks get away by apologizing. Maybe they do because they're not the first offender. Police, perhaps, using their discretion to decide whether to charge people, repeat offenders, said often people who are hauled up. But again, for the government of the day, it looked very bad when individuals, especially politicians, seem to get away with violations. And I think to see that this is reversed, at least it's taken a bit of time, Melissa, for these guys to be charged. I mean, everybody else seems to be charged on the spot. But so now you have at least a sense that the political elite are being disciplined to follow precisely the rules that they set for others. And that can't be a bad thing.
Well, we'll have to keep a close eye on this. I do want to point out, though, as leaders across the country, across the globe, are thinking about easing restrictions of their respective lockdowns. I mean, we spoke about New Zealand, but also I believe Italy, Spain, Iran, Australia, all looking to kind of ease some sort of restrictions. We turn to look at Hokkaido in Japan as an example. Hokkaido lifted their restrictions after several weeks, saying that after 3 weeks, they said that the lockdown was working and they lifted restrictions. Now, a second wave of infection hit the island harder, and that 26 days later, Hokkaido forced back into lockdown. All these are considerations that leaders will have to bear in mind as they make those difficult decisions. Now, we're going to take a quick break here on Consider This, but after this, we're going to continue that conversation we began last week regarding the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture's response to the challenges faced by the creative economy. So stay tuned to Consider This. Hello, if you've just joined us, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris, with me, Sharad Kutun. Last Friday on the show, we spoke to Datuk Sri Nancy Shukri, the Minister for Tourism, Arts and Culture, about the impact of the pandemic, not just on the tourism industry, but also on the creative economy. Now, in that interview, the Minister had denied that the arts sector is being sidelined over a focus on tourism. So tonight on the show, let's hear from those in the arts and cultural sector. Joining us on the line now, we have Izan Satrina Muhammad Salahuddin, founder of Malaysia's Cultural Economy Development Agency, or better known as Cendana. Izan, good evening. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
What feedback, Izan, have you heard from industry players following the Minister's interview last Friday?
Well, I must say I didn't realize how exciting it is to be on a discussion with you and Sharad. But look, YB Vanessa Datuk Sri Nancy has only been recently appointed approximately 8 to 9 weeks, give or take, in this position. So she's new in this portfolio. But yes, there has been a buzz of comments, feedback, frustration, anger, and a lot more being voiced out on social media. And recently, I think today in the press and radio too. So I will not dive into the sentiments that they've raised regarding YB Minister, but I will put emphasis on the other feedback the artists have raised, that the arts have been hit hard. We have been hit hard too. And COVID-19 has come unannounced. We are dealing with something horrible, invisible, that we have no familiarity on, except that it brings death to us, to our loved ones, to the nation. And in these circumstances, businesses of different sectors worldwide, locally, have been hard. And we must not forget that the arts has been equally hit too. All public gatherings, performances, exhibitions have been cancelled or postponed in the interest of Malaysia's collective well-being.
Yeah, Izan, let's look at what Cendana has done. Cendana, just for people who don't know, is part of or under My Creative Ventures, owned by the Ministry of Finance, but reports to the Ministry of Communications and Multimedia. So let's get very clear. I mean, you actually, through Cendana, had done a survey of the impact on the creative industry and the workers of the creative industry. Tell us a little bit about what you found and if you were surprised by what you found.
Sure. So a few steps back, we've been launched in 2017. We're tasked to develop 3 sectors: performing arts, visual arts, and independent music in small and medium spaces, less than 500 packs, and in public spaces. So when MCOO had taken place on 18th March, we had quickly put together a survey, rolled it out, benchmarked it against a member of the International Federation of Art Councils and Culture Agencies, an outfit called Culture Venture. And we mobilized a survey that had 20 questions to measure the impact of the pandemic to our 3 sectors in the arts. Now, from the 519 respondents that have partaken in the survey, between March 19th to April 9th, we have learned that 94% of the respondents were partially or fully dependent on the arts. On average, 93% were negatively impacted. 70% have suffered financial losses, and with 70%, they have lost most or all of their income of approximately 500 to 1,000 to 5,000 a week. So when we estimated, based on a rough percentage of what could make a universe for freelancers, we estimated the losses for arts in the next 9 months to be almost close to 100 million. Wow. And so that is even 5,000 pun besar, ni kan pula 100 million.
Izan, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to touch a little bit on that loss of income that you talked about. Now, what is Cendana doing or helping the arts and culture sector, especially in terms of perhaps monetary or even non-monetary support for the players within this industry?
Sure. So if since we're talking about surveys, I'll just quickly bring the audience's attention to a survey that we are hoping to undertake in the next couple of weeks to measure the consumers, or rather audience propensity to visit or partake in the arts after MCO and the other restrictions being lifted. So over time, we want to understand, will Malaysians come back and participate in the arts? Will people attend more outdoor events than indoors? Will they attend more if there are smaller crowds? Will they attend if they know that the venue operates a rigorous sanitation protocol? So when it comes to things like this, then we'll understand, we'll be able to roll out other tools and subsidy programs for our artists. But when we talk about now, we've just rolled out a recovery package, I think a week or 2 weeks ago, that intends to stabilize the arts and culture sector. We have rolled out about 6 funding programs. One that is happening now is the Create Now funding program that hopes to support artists, collectives, and arts organizations In a turnaround of 2 weeks, we're doing this bi-weekly rolling basis funding program that gives individuals 1,500 ringgit and collectors and art organizations 3,500 ringgit if they can incubate something virtual for us to incorporate onto our platform, or they can publish it on their platform. Tomorrow, we're rolling out two visual arts funding programs. One is Inspire, that intends to support career visual artists with minimum 12 years of experience to undertake a creative research program for about 2 months, and when they return, they can put up an exhibition or a publication together. The other visual arts funding program is called Visual Arts Showcase Funding Program, and it supports artists to undertake an exhibition. So curators, collectives, visual arts galleries that operate in non-profit sort of modules or outside the commercial art gallery and museum framework are encouraged to apply for that. We support up to 30,000 ringgit for those doing the exhibitions. For the creative research, we support artists up to 15,000 ringgit and an additional 30,000 ringgit to do a publication or exhibition.
Right. So if I can interrupt you, this is all wonderful stuff. I just want to know, do you have a full database of the individuals within the sector? Does the government of the day have that same database? Are they filling in the gaps? Essentially, are arts workers and creative economy workers visible to the government?
Well, that is the soalan cepumas, Sharat. Does the government of the day have a database? I believe they do. I am made to understand that, for example, the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture have a database of all NGOs nationwide. Whether they are active or not, I am not too sure. And whether they are assisting these artists now, I believe they are as well. I understand they have rolled out a series of competitions, as well as an e-market for crafts and artisans to do and sell their artwork as well during this period. For us, for example, we are identifying artists within Klang Valley to help them with food aid, 220 ringgit voucher, so they can put food on the table. And that's being funded by local foundations.
Izan, can I get your sense of a timeline for recovery for the creative economy? You know, bearing in mind that the difficulties for the arts and culture sector is going to extend far longer, even after the MCO is lifted.
Well, I think when we talk about creative economy is a huge agenda, and it encompasses from creative content, whether it's film or animation and gaming, and then the other smaller segments that don't provide as much GDP and jobs compared to film and animation. And those are where the end of the scale here is the one that is going to take a longer time to recover. We are estimating about 18 months, and therefore why we are trying to devise a 3-phase support program for the artists, whether it's a form of funding, whether it's a form of post-MCO and getting them back into spaces, whether it's about recharging the scene and subsidizing tickets and marketing all our artists and their programs. And then only once it's stabilized, we look into growing the scene again together.
Wonderful. Izan, thank you so much for speaking with us this evening. Appreciate your time as well as sharing your insights. Now, we're going to take a quick break. After this, we'll hear from Tiara Jacquelina, founder of the Infinity Group. Well, stay tuned to consider this. Thank you for staying with Sharad and I on Consider This. Let's continue our conversation, the one that we began on Consider This last week regarding the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture's response to the challenges faced by the creative economy. Now, joining us on the line, we have Tiara Jacqueline, founder of Infinity Group, the production company behind Puteri Gunung Ledang, Ola Bola and P. Ramlee the Musical. Tiara, good evening. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now,
thanks for having me.
I'm just wondering, Tiara, thinking about the way the world is going to be after the MCO and during a time of COVID, observing social and physical and social distancing is just going to be a part of our daily lives now, long after the MCO is lifted. Tiara, how do you see that specifically impacting the making and also the consumption of performing arts?
Well, I think it's really going to be challenges that we as performing artists and people who work in theatre, entertainment, music, film, we're all just going to have to deal with it, really, because, I think we spent a few days moaning about things and wondering what's going to happen, but what I've decided and what my company, Infinity, and I have decided is, you know what, let's assume we're not going to be open for another 2 years in the theatre. We're not going to be able to work for another 2 years in the theatre. What do we do next? And so we have pivoted as a company. We've just decided if we never get to go on stage again for the next few years, what are we going to do? So I think the harsh reality of things is that it is going to be tough for everyone, but what do we do next about it is what I'm most interested in.
Tiara, do you think at this point in time, the big companies, perhaps with deeper pockets, with the ability to kind of see this through, as you say, your company, you can in fact imagine not using the theatre for the next 2 years, that will separate you, the big players, from the smaller players who might not have the wherewithal, who might actually not survive this period?
Well, you know what, Sharad, the bigger the company, the deeper the bleed, really. People don't realize that. Because if you're a two-man show, it's just you and your partner. But if you have 25 people on staff, you can't so readily just say, you know what, I'm sorry, guys. We have to move on, and we have bills to pay, and no theatre company in Malaysia is rich, I'll tell you that. Certainly not Infinity.
Have you had to ask your workers, the people who you employ, to take a pay cut? I mean, have you put them on no pay leave? What has been the realities for your company?
Okay, well, I tell you what, it's hit us like it's hit any other SME, and we have had staff that it pained me to have to make them go on unpaid leave. The rest of the staff who have stayed on, all our HODs, everyone's volunteered a pay cut, which is wonderful because it's helped us stay alive. But yeah, with no end in sight, that's the thing we've had to deal with.
Right.
Yeah, but
Tiara,
yeah, it's affected us.
Last Friday, the minister talked a lot about moving, the performance arts online, a virtual performance, so to speak. Do you see that as happening? I'm wondering about the consumption of the performance arts after this or during this time. You talked about 2 years of perhaps, the timeline for recovery. In that 2 years, can online solutions really fill in the gap?
Well, I tell you what, Melissa, it used to be taboo for any performing artist to imagine their work being consumed anything but live because of the whole experience and the whole drama of watching something live, right? But reality sucks. Reality really just hits you on the head and you think about survival. And so, the greats of musical theatre like Andrew Lloyd Webber have decided, the way forward is to stay online. Otherwise, people forget about you. You become irrelevant. And so that's what we've done, actually. Funnily enough, in the last 1 week, we decided Infinity is going to go online, and we set up video on demand channel on Vimeo. It's called Infinity V, where we're putting all our shows online one by one, one at a time. And we're hoping that if we never get to put a show on in the theatre again, we're going to find a way to put our shows we might hopefully get a stage at least and put it on and stream our shows live to audiences all around the world, which might be a blessing in disguise for us, really. So instead of moaning about it, we're just trying to guys, what do we do? Okay, the only way is to go online. How do we go online? So we started going through our library of what do we own that we can sell, to TV, to Netflix, to Astro, and to everyone. So,
I guess the question is, Tiara, not just what you can sell, but what people are willing to buy. And we were just speaking to Izan Satrina from Cendana. They're going to do a survey of audiences. What is it that audiences are going to be willing to put money, hard cash down for? But, apart from that, there's also this question of, your previous productions you put online, fine. But what about new productions? How do you create new work under the demands of social distancing?
Yeah, we're already thinking about how we're going to be, we've already started doing Zoom rehearsals and readings online. We're working with choreographers to record bits of dance choreography, send it to actors. So, don't forget, we're supposed to be staging Puteri Gunung Ledang in July this year. So we've already sold 7,000 tickets for the show, and now we're having to think about what happens to our show. If we don't get to do the show, what do we do? If we get to do the show, it's on in 2 months. We need to start thinking about rehearsing it, and we are doing that right now, actually.
I see. Okay.
So do plan A, plan B, plan J and K and L.
Work your way through the alphabet, Tiara. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. I appreciate your time and sharing your personal experiences with your company and going through these difficult times. Thank you, Tiara. That's all the time we have on the show for you tonight. I'm Melissa Idris with me, Sharad Kuttan, signing off for this episode of Consider This. We'll be back with you same time tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching and good night.
Alright, bye. Baiklah, terima kasih kepada semua penonton Astrawani di platform Facebook Live, YouTube Live dan juga semua laman media sosial